Hello, my name is Mary Ann and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to welcome you to Recovery in Action, Life on Life's Terms. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're glad you're all here, especially newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their discussion to their problems with alcohol. This is an open Big Book step study meeting where we discuss the 12 steps of recovery as they're written in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, with the focus on their application in everyday life in recovery. This is the 7th session of the 6th cycle of the workshop that was presented on June 8, 2024, where we completed step 5. Next week we'll begin step 6. If you would like to contribute to the 7th tradition, you may do so using the QR codes displayed. Contributions are applied towards the group's expenses and support our service offices. Recordings of the workshop are available, and if you would like to be placed on the distribution list, please send an email to recoveryinaction462@gmail.com to receive the links. These links are unlisted and not public. I request that you not share them at the public level or post on any social media sites. The workshop typically begins with a brief meditation in which an inspirational music video is played. Because of copyright restrictions, it cannot be on the video. However, a link is provided, and I suggest you take a minute, view the video, and take a brief meditation for yourself before you begin the workshop. As the recording begins, the workshop is already in session. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or require my assistance further. I hope you enjoy the workshop. Another custom of this group is to start the workshop by saying the full version of the Serenity Prayer. We're all familiar with the first part, but many of us are unaware that there is a second part to it, and I believe it's this second part of the prayer that reflects what recovery is all about. So if you would all please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. We're starting with an overview of what we've covered so far, and then we will be picking up today on the 5th step. And where we start is always in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the Big Book is the set of instructions on how to work the 12 steps. It's not the 12 and 12. The 12 and 12 was written as a supplement to these first 164 pages of the Big Book. Oh, and by the way, happy Founders Day to everybody. I know some people are in Akron today, and they're having a great time. I'm seeing all their pictures on social media. But again, the Big Book is the set of instructions on how to work the 12 steps. And the 12 steps are the set of instructions on how to get rid of the things that are blocking us off from our higher power, how to get connected to God, and how to stay surrendered from alcohol, making our life unmanageable. And merely reading the Big Book without experiencing it is really useless, because you cannot learn how to swim without jumping in the water. You cannot learn how to play an instrument without learning how to read music, and then practicing. So that's what we need to do. We're learning how to practice working the 12 steps, which is an ongoing practice as we continue in recovery. When we get into the cover page of the Big Book, it states that this is the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. When we say recovered, we mean the problem is removed, I don't have to make a choice as to whether I drink or not because I don't even think about it. I automatically turn to God instead of alcohol. Alcohol is no longer an option to solve my problems. Selfishness and self centeredness are gone. I'm no longer angry, fearful, or harmful, and my old destructive ways of thinking and acting have been replaced by new and peaceful ones. And we're going to really talk about what we mean by recovered, because the next place we're going to look is the 10th step promise, which is on page 84. And it states, we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned. And we can read the rest of it, but just to sum it up, it says this is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And then when we go to page 27, it defines recovered as ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. And then in the appendix, where in the spiritual experience, it says that this is a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism, has manifested itself among us in many different forms. And then the forward to the first edition states that we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. And it later goes on to say that the only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. However, the desire to stop drinking is not the only requirement to becoming recovered. There's other things involved, such as being willing and actually doing everything that the big book says to do. And this is where we start with step one. And we've already covered this. Step one is that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. This is about self-knowledge. I know I'm an alcoholic. I know I cannot survive. I'm powerless over alcohol. The ability of choice is gone when it comes to alcohol, because as a real alcoholic, the only thing this self-knowledge does is make me realize that I cannot take just one drink without being physically driven to take one drink after the other. This then allows me the opportunity, if I'm spiritually fit, to pass on the first drink. And I can only do this on a continuous basis if I'm connected to my higher power, which brings us to step two. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And the great thing about step two is I'm the one who decides what that power is. And the only requirement for step two is to answer yes to this question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than me that can solve my problem? Once I can say yes to this question, I'm at step three. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. It's only a decision. I'm only making a decision to move forward with this work. This is the third step prayer, where I offer myself to God. And I'm saying, may I do thy will always. I'm asking God to do this. And therefore, now I am ready, once I make the decision to do this, to start with step four, which is made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. There are four fourth step inventories: resentments, fears,
and harms. Harms excluding our sex conduct, harms including our sex conduct. And when we get into our inventories, this is where we start to look at our character defects. And in most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relations, including sex, were hurt or threatened. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it self-esteem, security, ambitions, or our personal or sex relations that had been interfered with, which boils down to these parts of self-esteem, our pocketbook, our emotional security, our ambitions, and our personal relationships, how we react with others, including our sex relationships, which then brings us to look at these character defects as how it boils them down. And we ask ourselves, where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Although a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person entirely and look where we were to blame. The inventory was ours, not the other person's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight from page 67 in the big book. And this boils down to these 5 main character defects, which are going to carry through to all of our inventories. I'm selfish, I'm dishonest, I'm self-seeking, I'm frightened, and I'm inconsiderate. These are the 5 main character defects. And then as we get a little bit deeper into it, we have a list of a whole laundry list of other character defects, which kind of roll up under those. And we look at what these are. Because the main thing about it is that we repeat what we don't repair. And we find ourselves experiencing the same thing over and over and over again because our character defects come into play. We continue to be unhappy and wonder why it's always happening. And it's not the person that we listed on the resentment inventory or any of our other inventories that cause our unhappiness, but it's our character defects that come into play. So now, as of last week, we went through and we did all of the inventories, and we did the pre-step 5 inventory where we reversed those resentments, and it became crystal clear that if I didn't have these character defects, I wouldn't have done the things that I did to cause the resentments and to cause the problems. So now we also worked on what was it called? The Ideal Self worksheet that was also in the workbook. So we've got something to work towards. And now we are at step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 5 is done in different ways depending on the sponsor, and that's always a good thing. However, you want to make sure that you work on any resentments that don't ring true. Remember when we did that reverse inventory, just make sure that when you reverse it, it makes sense when you reverse it. And then page 75 of the big book states, when we decide who's to hear our story, we waste no time. Now, to clarify here, the word story does not mean I was born on such and such a day and I tell everything that happened to me. My mother dropped me on my head when I was a baby, and my mother put beer in my bottle so that I would go to sleep. It doesn't mean that. What it basically means is that this is my truth. And my story is that my life sucked because I was mean-spirited, dishonest, jealous, judgmental, and lazy. That's it. I don't have to go into all the nitty-gritty details, but we're basically going to be focusing on what are the character defects that cause me to do these things. Step 5 is not talking about our feelings or a psychiatry session. It doesn't include a list of your good qualities. Step 5 is looking at the things that are blocking you off from your higher power. And these things are your character defects. So that when you do your 5th step, you'll get together with your sponsor so that you can admit the exact nature of your wrongs. And the exact nature of your wrongs are your character defects, and every negative thing you ever said, thought, or did, and everything that caused you and those around you to be unhappy was a result of a character defect. So by telling your sponsor that you're dishonest, they know that you've cheated, stolen, or lied. They don't need to hear about each incident of you doing it, nor do they need to hear you express who you're mad at or what someone did to you. Some of you may be surprised that you will not tell the stories associated with what's on your inventories, nor will you discuss your reasons for being angry, just so you can stop focusing on that. I assure you, your sponsor will get to hear all the things that need to be heard once you get to step 8. All you're doing for step 5 is you read all your character defects out loud from column 5 from all 4 of your inventories. And as you do this, you realize that the same character defects keep showing up over and over and over again. So after reading all your character defects, you tell your sponsor your deepest, darkest secrets, the things that you have thought, said, or done that caused you to be embarrassed, ashamed, or guilty, the things you don't want the world to know. This might include things you've never told your best friend or your spouse. And again, this is only about your behavior, not anyone else's. A reminder is that your sponsor should be a safe place for you. You should be able to say anything you want without being judged or criticized. Anything discussed should not be repeated to anyone else. You should feel as if you have the best sponsor in the entire program. There should be trust and mutual respect without any fear or anger. If you don't feel this way about your sponsor, you might want to think about getting another sponsor. It's important to note here that step 5 is done so you can see what's blocking you off from your higher power and what's causing your problems. Anything other than looking at the character defects will turn this into a selfish, self-centered, egotistical event and give you the opportunity to justify how you feel and continue to blame others. The purpose of step 5 is to have the things blocking you off from your higher power revealed. So that's basically it when it comes to step 5. Is you're not going through, you're not telling a big long story, you're just focusing on what are these character defects. And that brings us to prepare for step 6, your pre-step 6 preparation. Before you do step 6, and before, wait a minute, after you do step 5 and before you do step 6, how I got it out of there, right? This is what you do before you do step 6. So, and this again is straight from the big book on page 75, where it says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we've done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. carefully reading the first 5 proposals, that means the first 5 steps, we ask if we have omitted anything. For we're building an ark through which we shall walk a free man or woman at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? So we want to do exactly what the instructions say to do. There are very few time frames in the big book, and this is a very specific one. It specifies 1 hour. A good way to do this is to set a timer for 1 hour. If you finish before the timer goes off, use the rest of the hour to pray, meditate, or think about things that you're grateful for. The instructions here for steps 4 and 5, which are the steps that deal with us, are now complete. Now it's time to move to steps 6 and 7. Steps 6 and 7 are where a shift takes place. With steps 6 and 7, we start talking to God and looking to Him for His help. And this is a good place for us to stop.
Thank you so much for your participation. I hope you enjoyed the workshop, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And now, please join me in our closing prayer, which is St. Faustina's prayer for mercy. Eternal God, in whom mercy is endless and the treasury of compassion inexhaustible, look kindly upon us and increase your mercy in us, that in difficult moments we might not despair nor become despondent, but with great confidence submit ourselves to your holy will, which is love and mercy itself. Amen.